Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. Remember to subscribe to our free podcast so you won't miss any of our inspiring content. Here is episode 133.
So when you have the best tools combined together, there's nothing that can stop you and you can become fluent, really, and sound like a native.
Benjamin Franklin once said, "Do not curse the darkness, rather light a candle instead." If you're ready to set your mind on fire, then prepare yourself for the Luminous Mind with your host, Rebecca Bowman.
Today's fire starter is Alex de Chambure. He was born and raised in Paris, France, and is a linguist at heart. After obtaining a master's degree in French and English, he set sail for California to teach at UC Irvine. In 2004, he was asked to teach English to the daughter and grandson of French President Chirac in Paris. This is when he started putting together a one-of-a-kind language method that he has been sharing with the homeschooling community for the past 6 years. Alex de Chambure is now the head of Language City Academy, an online language school for homeschoolers. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
This is going to be really fun to talk about languages. It's definitely an area we're seeing a lot of things cropping up, and so it's going to be fun to talk about your language program in particular. Why don't you go ahead, first of all, and briefly tell our audience a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, well, it's very interesting how I got into foreign languages. When I was 11 years old, growing up in Paris, France, my parents told me next year in the sixth grade, you're going to have to learn English. And that scared me, really, it truly scared me. And I thought I have to get ready before school starts. And I started trying to learn a little bit. And really quickly, the fear turned into passion, really. I thought it was fascinating. I was looking forward to being able to speak to people from other countries, get their perspective on everything about the possibility of living abroad. So it turned into a passion. And then starting sixth grade, every day of my life, I started learning English. And after that, Spanish. And so I ended up getting a master's degree in English and French as foreign languages and teaching in the U.S. and at UC Irvine for the first time, and then the Lycée Français de Los Angeles. And then I ran into plenty of very interesting people in Los Angeles. And in the end, I'll tell you the story later, but I was led to create my own method and teach privately until now. And now I'm geared mostly towards homeschoolers. It was a complete coincidence, I must say.
That's great. But tell us a little bit more. I want to hear how the story of how you ended up teaching English to the daughter and grandson of the French President Chirac. How did that happen?
Okay, so I was in Los Angeles. I was teaching at the French American school, and I was tutoring the daughter of a French actress. And one day she told me she had to move back to France for a year to shoot a couple of movies. And she said, I'd love it if you could come back to Paris and tutor my daughter because she'll be homeschooled in Paris. And I said, I like Paris, but I love LA. and then one day, I went back there and she said, Claude Chirac and Martin Chirac, they need an English tutor too. And the name obviously sounded familiar because it was President Chirac at the head of France at the time, but I didn't really know Claude or Martin. And I called my dad that day and I said, are you familiar with the Claude Chirac and Martin Chirac? Are they related to the president? And then, well, yeah, that's the president's daughter. And so, oh my gosh, it was pretty exciting. And at the same time, I was just starting to put together my French method for a few actors that I was working with. And so I flew back to Paris for a year and taught English to the president's daughter and grandson. It was amazingly exciting. Every day I had to go to security. Well, first times I had to go through security, but then everything was checked and walked into the president's palace and crossed all those huge rooms. And it was just amazing. I mean, I could talk to you about this for hours. It was very interesting, but it was great. And then I thought, if I'm going to teach English to the daughter of the president, who was at the time she was his communication advisor, I thought I can't come up with something very average and open any random books and give them things that are not going to be useful. So I started creating that same method from scratch in English. And so that was absolutely fascinating. So after a year, I told her that I missed LA really, and I grew up in Paris, so, the grass is always greener on the other side. So I wanted to be in Los Angeles. So I did that for a year. It was great. It was very nice. I met so many amazing people. I was really happy. And then I was glad to go back home to LA, what I consider home now.
Well, and that had to have been a huge networking situation of meeting all those great people. So that's great. So you talked a little bit about being in the 6th grade and, needing to learn English. Is that how you found your mission, or go into a little bit more detail about that, of how you really started working with languages?
It was a combination of several things. Through music, I was really excited to understand the lyrics of all the songs that I would listen to. And it's just that I thought the accent, British and American, I started hearing the difference very early, and I heard the difference. I thought both were very nice in a different way. Well, I know most Americans don't like their accents, but, when you learn English as a foreign language, it's pretty exciting. It's beautiful, whether it's English, Australian accent, or American accent. They all sound great, really. I mean, we can't always tell the difference. It sounded amazing. I thought it was the most beautiful thing in the world, to be quite honest. And so not only the language, the way it sounded, the possibility of talking to people who were so different, who thought differently from me, the ability to travel, see different things, understand new cultures, new points of view. It was just amazing. So I loved it. And so I took my own books, because what I did at school I thought was not enough. So I took my own books and just learned on my own by myself.
Wow. And is that how you talk about this language program as for homeschoolers or self-directed learners, or, whatever we want to call them? Is that why you seem to focus in that direction? What is the reason for focusing on those types of students?
Homeschoolers. Well, originally it wasn't specifically meant for homeschoolers, but it would be more right to say that the way I put the method together ended up naturally applying to online learning. And of course, I can always direct the lessons and everything more towards homeschoolers or adults or business people. It just takes a few tweaks here and there. But it was originally really for online learning. And I could tell you the story of how I got into homeschoolers, really, and working with homeschoolers. It was really random. I had a few calls from homeschoolers, and they loved what I did with their kids. And so they referred me to more homeschoolers. And at some point, I was teaching someone, and the mother of that student had an online language school, and she had some guests from France at some point. And she said, look, my daughter's taking French, and that's what she's doing. Her tutor is doing this with her, and he sent her these files and this, or he created this and that. And he showed them, and those French people said, that's amazing. We've never seen that. This is how French should be taught. Everything that we've seen so far in French books is terrible, or things that are irrelevant, old vocab from the 70s that we don't use anymore. So many things that are wrong. And this guy got it right. And so she was very excited, and she called me and said, why don't you teach for me? And I said, sure, I'd love to. And so I started getting into the homeschooling world, community. And I ended up meeting so many homeschooling families, parents, kids. I saw how they worked and functioned differently. And I loved the approach. I loved their free spirits, really, their approach, all the freedom that they have in the way they lead their lives, they educate their kids, the options that they have. It's just amazing. Very interesting people, I think.
Well, and they probably have time. They actually have time to actually access your online classes versus somebody in traditional school may not always have time to do that. Definitely.
Right. And not only do they have time, but also those lessons, they're recorded. That's one of the beauties of the tools that I use, that the lessons are recorded. So if somebody misses a class, they can catch up, listen to it at night at 11 p.m. or 2-3 days later, and they can review. So that's one of the beauties of the whole method and the online process.
Great. That sounds wonderful. So tell me a little bit of how you feel like your paradigm or your educational philosophy changed over time and with your experience.
Well, when I started teaching after college, in a way, I must admit I was a little lazy, like most college students in a way, like many college students. And I would try to get a book, a French book, and say, oh, this is an okay book. It's decent. Even if it wasn't great, I would still keep it, because what was my other option? Well, my other option was to create a whole method of my own. So it was either the easy way, grab any book that was decent, or create everything from scratch was a huge amount of work. And when I was 21, 22 years old, I wasn't ready for that. And so, after teaching for a few years and really thinking, what am I doing? I'm barely teaching. That's I'm doing a mediocre job. I'm doing just the same thing as everybody else, which is bad, I must say. And so at some point, when I met a few actors and I thought, oh my gosh, actors, famous actors, I have to do something good for them. And the president's daughter, I thought, okay, it's time to put all this together. I know what it took. I had all the knowledge in me. I thought I had an amazing gift as a linguist. It was a gift and passion. And those two combined together put me in a position to create something absolutely astounding. I thought, it's in me. I'm one of the few people in the world that can do that. Why don't I just do it? It's going to be a lot of work, but that's what I was born for. I think we all have a calling. We all have something, a goal in life, something we're born for. And a gift, as you've probably heard, a gift is a terrible thing to waste. And I thought, well, I can't waste that. And there you go. I started writing, putting all this together. It's a huge amount of work because there's one part of my method, which is explaining the language, giving examples in a nutshell. And the other part of the method, which is all the assignments and all comprehension exercises that I've put together and extra learning tools, such as providing many examples, pronouncing everything fast and slowly so that people can hear the difference. So it's a huge amount of work, but I thought it's worth it because, I've seen students from all kinds of schools, private, public schools, the best schools you can think of, and they all use bad books. I mean, books they're not great. When I do work with students who go to school, I know I'm doing this so that they can get an A. That's all. I'm not teaching them to speak a language or to understand. It's what I do is almost irrelevant.
Yeah. And maybe that's another difference between working with a homeschooler is that many times it's for a specific purpose or they have a passion about it.
Exactly. And so schools really, even if a teacher wanted and had the freedom to do something else, I think most of them would not know what to do. So they're glad that they have directions and guidelines on what to do. As you said, for homeschoolers, they're free to do what they want. So I think, wow, I'm free too. I have the opportunity to do what I want with them. So what I'll do is I'll teach them the language as it should be taught so that they can speak and so that they can understand people.
Yeah. Well, I love it because they, like I said, they have a direction versus it just being a required class. But let's kind of go into some of your obstacles that you had, as you're trying to write this curriculum and different things like that. What are some obstacles that you faced and what did you learn from those struggles? I mean, you talked about it all being inside you, but it's hard to get it out sometimes, right?
I think it's more a question of, making sure I'm organized the right way. And it's just technically, when I started showing it to some people, they looked at it, they were almost in awe thinking it's amazing, it's great, but gosh, how long does it take you to come up with all that? Some people use PowerPoint, have an idea of how long it takes to put together a 10-page PowerPoint, how long it takes to come up with the colors, the layouts, and everything. So when they see everything that I've done, they understand that, it's a question of time. You have to be very patient. But, because it's amazing how I was able to acquire those skills in language. And so if you could see inside my brain, it's almost made like an amazing language software where everything is perfectly organized, very clearly explained. So I just have to reproduce it on the outside, on a document and many documents. But it's doable. It's just going to take a while.
So just be patient, right?
Right. That's really most of what it is. Be patient. Other than that, I don't see any other obstacles.
Great. All right. Well, let's kind of go into your specific method of what you do. We kind of talked about, at the beginning, I talked about just everything. We've got Rosetta Stone. There's all these different language programs that are starting to kind of creep out. What do you think makes your method so special, and how does it stand out from those other methods?
Well, I could talk about Rosetta Stone specifically, or I could talk about most method as a whole and tell you the things that I don't like about them, what they can do and what they won't do for you. I think in general, if I don't want to talk for 5 hours on this, I could, but I'll spare you. I'll tell you in a nutshell. Most of these programs, and I'm not talking about Rosetta Stone for that, but the average program, average language school, average language class will teach you to say a lot of things. So you will be able to express ideas, but you will be limited in what you can say. And for that, I'm talking about all programs, Rosetta Stone, everything else. You will not be able to understand people in a conversation. It doesn't matter if you complete and understand every level of Rosetta Stone or any Duolingo or any of those. If you're dropped in a conversation in France, their programs will not allow you to understand 1 or 2 words or more.
Yeah.
For many reasons. People speak fast. People blend words together, and that's something that no method teaches. How do you go from reading a sentence slowly to blending words together when you go fast, skipping syllables, skipping entire words. That most methods and teachers don't teach it. They either think it's not proper, but nobody realizes that that's how we talk in everyday conversations. They either think it's not proper, it should not be taught, or they don't realize that that's how people talk, and that for a non-native speaker, it makes a difference. So a teacher who's a native speaker of his language that he's teaching doesn't hear the difference between speaking fast or slowly. And people who teach and who are not native speakers think either I should not teach that, that's not proper, or they don't know about it. And that's one of the many aspects. Also, one of the things that you won't get is at some point, I've met so many students who have a very decent level in French, and they say, I don't understand people, and I think there's something missing. And I know what's missing. I went through the process myself in English, and I can tell you when I was 11 years old, I didn't speak a word of English. And I think I've done a pretty good job. So I'll tell you. I think that a huge aspect of language is simply idiomatic expressions and words. And that's completely overlooked because it really, to be quite honest, it's really a list of things to remember, of random expressions or expressions that will seem random to you. Nobody's come up with anything that's decent or good to, I'm not sure how to put it, but to add to a list of vocabulary that someone should have. And so a few people, usually intellectuals, PhD people, maybe we won't have a master's degree, that they've come up with a method. And it feels to me when I see all those French methods that they've all copied off each other. So there's nothing really new or nothing that stands out from one method to another. And all the things that are missing in all books. To be quite honest, there are even rules that I've made up that I've incorporated in my method because they're idiomatic phrases, idiomatic expressions, or structures that no one has thought of putting or creating or putting in a method or in a book that we use on a daily basis. So I've created lessons specifically for that.
Wow. It's
one of a few things combined together, really. There's not one easy answer to tell you what's missing. Let me give you a few more points. Talking about Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone does not explain grammar. That's something that I don't like. Immersion works mostly for kids up to 10 years old, I would say. Beyond that, you need explanations, I think. Especially when you're an adult after 18 years old, you need explanations to understand how a language works. A lot of schools make the mistake of saying, oh, let's speak in French or in Spanish now. It's 50 minutes a day? That's not immersion. If someone doesn't understand a language at the age of 15, 16, 18, they're not going to understand because you're going to speak the language 50 minutes a day to them. So that's not going to work. So beginners, you need to speak in their language to explain things. That's yet another aspect. So Rosetta Stone doesn't do that. Rosetta Stone doesn't explain. And you do need that. You do need translations. That would be a more costly process for them.
Yeah, it is annoying when you are an adult and you know how to conjugate sentences and you're like, well, how do these words fit together? And I definitely have had that problem when you're dropped in a different country and you're trying to speak their language. You just don't know how to, you may know the words, but you don't know how to form sentences on the fly, right, to be able to carry on that conversation. So, and you talked about with the vocabulary. Is your vocabulary, there's a big difference between a very eloquent or more formal type of speech versus, the everyday kind of talk. Is there a difference? Mm-hmm. Is that what you're talking about? There's a difference between that?
Yes, in part. That's one aspect of the language is I like when I teach a new word or expression to say, well, this is standard French. This is super formal French. This is colloquial. And possibly, I don't do that too much with homeschoolers, but talking about slang. But, there are words that they would hear all the time. So I always tell people, don't judge the language. As a teacher, I want to be neutral towards the language. So I will tell them, I don't use slang. But when I learned English, I remembered, I thought, okay, I don't understand what everybody says. So what's missing? And I found out that what was missing was a lot of slang. And it allows you to know what kind of people you're dealing with when you hear and you can recognize the type of speech register that people use. Now in English, I'm happy. I can say, okay, I won't be friends with that one. I will most likely be friends with that one over there. And at least I understand. I hear people on the subway in New York a few times. I took the subway and I was happy. I could understand what people were saying. I was really proud. So that's one of the aspects of the language. And then again, when I teach kids who go to school and I see them in AP French or French 4 and I see them studying French literature, which is great. It's beautiful. It's amazing. But they don't know how to order a glass at a restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and they're trying to understand middle-aged French, old French. It doesn't make any sense to me, but that's how, and that's probably why so many of you are homeschooled. And that's, I can see why when I see that.
Yeah. There is an age gap when you're dropped into a community, right? You're not going to be speaking just with older people. Before we go on, let's listen to this message. Recently, the Luminous Mind became an affiliate for EduSense, which offers tremendous discounts on educational supplies. I personally use EduSense to purchase our family supplies because of their great prices, responsive shipping times, and best of all, the chance to earn EduBucks, which I use towards future purchases. Who doesn't love a great deal within a deal? To get a 90% savings on your EduSense materials, go to theluminousmind.net and click on the sponsor page to find the affiliate link. Start using EduSense to illuminate your educational experience.
C'était une réunion de vieux. Je me souviens tout assis là dans un coin et nous étions comme des objets. Nous mangeons à notre faim, mais la maison était déjà satisfaisante. Et donc, naturellement, c'était extraordinaire. La chose la plus étrange que j'ai entendue, j'étais parti dans la forêt, j'ai rencontré 3 mâles oiseaux.
Welcome back to The Luminous Mind with Alex and Language City Academy. So in your introduction video, you talk about not speaking like a robot. Is that kind of what we've already covered, or do you want to go into a little bit more of that? What do you mean by that?
Well, I was really thinking of several students that I've met in my life who are extraordinary linguists, really. They managed to master French. They've learned everything that they could. They learned grammar. They learned so much vocab. And they spoke very clearly, somewhat slowly, and it's fine, really. It's not a problem. The only thing is that they spoke very standard French, as I said, like a robot. And a lot of people told them, those kids that I met, those people that I met, they told me I spoke like a robot. And, well, yeah, you do. And that's part of the reason why they were all frustrated and told me, well, I speak pretty well, I have a good accent, but I don't understand what people say. I can't watch a movie. I don't understand what they say. Because there's that gap in the way that they've learned and the way that native speakers speak. And that's the gap that I'm trying to fill with them through lessons and through various exercises that I've created that, students have access to, where you hear sentences pronounced slowly and you get used to the way native speakers pronounce them.
Well, like you said, the speed makes a big difference in the language.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your services and how kind of your website's set up and, how that whole program works and how people can join.
Very simple. The year is divided into 2 semesters and also a summer session. So the 2 semesters are divided into 16 weeks, and there's 1 live webinar a week in our virtual classroom. And it's a very interactive classroom. There's an interactive whiteboard. Kids can write, when we do an exercise, they can write on the board. There's the microphone. There's my webcam that's on so they can see me, which is really, a lot of people think it's important when learning a foreign language. And I can understand. You like to see people, the teacher's lips move, see how it goes, how it works. And it's more interactive that way. I think it's nicer. And also, all the lessons are recorded. So if a student misses a lesson, he can catch up later, or they can review. When I was a kid, I wish I'd had that. I went to school. If I daydreamed for 5, 10, 15 minutes, then it was over. I missed everything and it was all gone. Those lessons, they all stay with you. If you didn't pay attention, if you missed them, you can review them later. You can review them and practice pronunciation. Listen to the explanations again. Listen to the examples again until it makes sense. Sometimes you have to read or listen to an explanation 2 or 3 times so that it makes sense. So that's one of the aspects. So you have 1 webinar every week for 55 minutes. Kids listen, get to ask questions, read the sentences. And then besides that, there's a whole platform called Moodle that more and more schools and universities use. And on that platform, you get the link to attend the live webinar. That's, you have a password, ID and password, and you can access that website. You have the link to join the live webinar. Then every day after the lesson, we post the link to the recorded webinar. And then there are a bunch of assignments. And really, it's free for the students to do as much as they want. If they want a lot of practice, they'll get a lot of practice. A lot of written assignments, videos for vocabulary. They have videos of oral classes where they get used to how we read a sentence slowly and how native speakers blend words and sentences together. It's trickier, but they get used to it. Sentences follow each other. I repeat every sentence twice. The same in Spanish, same in Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. So it's the most complete approach, I think, so that at the end of the program, someone goes to France, there'll be no surprise. They'll be able to understand and have a conversation and pass for a native speaker. Really, that's what's amazing about it.
Well, and I think it's interesting how talk about webinars and actually seeing the person, because I think that is one thing that's really frustrating for me to learn the language is sometimes if you can see how somebody's formed their mouth or whatever, maybe I can get those accents a little more.
Right. It does help. It does help. You're right.
And then also technology is wonderful now that we can kind of collaborate together and have practice together versus just learning it on your own. Because sometimes if you're not with somebody, and that's where I mess up is if I'm not with them on a regular basis like that, I say the word incorrectly. And then it could end up being a totally different word.
Right, I know.
All the way around.
And to be quite honest, there's something else that I love is thinking, when I teach those online classes, that I've got someone in New York, someone in Toronto, someone in Italy, someone in England or in France. It's just amazing. And you say, oh, it's raining here, it's snowing here. Oh, I'm in the sun. It's, 80 degrees in California, And I just love that. People will share, there's no one around me. The first store is 50 miles away. It's just amazing thing. We're all in that virtual classroom with so many different backgrounds. It's just great.
An international experience too.
Right.
So,
yep.
Well, and another thing I noticed about your website, and I think maybe an advantage, and you can clarify that if you want, is that you aren't trying to offer every language that's out there, that you're very specialized and focused. Is there a reason behind that, or are you just trying to expand it?
Eventually, I will expand it. I wanted to simply start with the most, I thought, were the most useful languages or most in demand. And I'm not a Chinese teacher, obviously, but I know that my method could apply to any language. And so I'm working with the teachers so that to make sure that they put together my vision of a language, but apply, with their knowledge and skills to other languages. Yeah.
Great. Well, tell us about maybe some testimonials, some success that you've seen as you've worked with kids in this program.
Oh, wow. Well, they do go to France. Usually, the parents manage to take them to France. And a lot of them, when they're passionate about it, there's nothing that can stop them, And I think that's a great thing about homeschoolers. It's usually their choice to take French or not. And so I've got someone, I was teaching him, and somehow we got back in touch a year later. And he continued working all the tools that I gave him. And he started from scratch, zero, nothing, no French. We start with bonjour, au revoir, everything. I taught him, for a year. And then I didn't talk to him for a year. He continued working. But it was an accelerated program. It was really very accelerated. So very, very intense. He was very motivated. And a year later, we had a conversation in French. It was just amazing. It was, wow, I can believe it. And other people too. Remember another girl, same thing. She wanted to do an accelerated program with me in French. Very motivated. And same thing, I didn't talk to her for a few months, and she just loved it. Oh, she was so excited. Every lesson that we had, she was, oh, this is amazing. And she loved it. She said, I'm spending all my time reviewing the webinars, doing your assignments. Same thing, 6 months later, she really could converse. There's always a level of dedication in anything that you do. When you're passionate, when you really want it, there's nothing that can stop you. So when you have the best tools combined together, there's nothing that can stop you, and you can become fluent, really, and sound like a native, as I said.
Well, and I love how personal you are with everybody. It sounds like you are very involved. That is the difference between just any online program, is that it's not a computerized, once again, speaking like a robot, where you're there interacting with them, maybe have a better grasp on how they're grasping the program versus just spitting out vocabulary words.
Right, exactly. And again, I see other kids who take French in schools, and so much time is wasted on random things, vocab that's not even accurate, and they just do vocab all day. Really, what's the point? Vocab is very nice, but you can get, what I do is I give vocab through lessons explaining and teaching something new, meaningful, and relevant. I'm just not giving vocab for the sake of giving vocab.
Yeah. It's nice to know, to point at things and say what that is. But like we talked about before, conjugating that sentence is a big deal. So
right. What I mean is that vocabulary, I think anybody can do that on his own. Nobody needs me to learn vocabulary. You can ask me questions on pronunciation. What kind of language is it? Is it standard? Is it like, okay, but just to learn basic vocabulary words, you don't need me. So a lot of times, I'll send you to vocabulary videos, but the time spent with me live in lessons is really valuable time where you learn something that you won't be learning anywhere else. That's the idea.
That is wonderful. Well, tell me, what do you feel like are some personal habits that maybe a person who wants to learn a language should do often to be successful?
Well, what I tell my students is that they should review the lesson that we do together because they get the link to watch it again. Do all the exercises, written and audio, oral comprehension exercises that I provide them with, until they really understand, truly understand, and then once they reach a certain level that within a year, I give my students many links to online radio stations, online TV stations, interesting TV shows, French music. We strongly encourage them to take the opportunity of getting hooked up with a foreign student who's learning English abroad, Spain, Latin America, France, and communicate with them, because all this together is going to make you fluent and better. Because, when you think of it, language is a huge thing. It's a huge, one language is huge field to master perfectly. I think it's like any field, you never stop learning, but you can get better and better until you feel proficient. Yeah. That's the idea.
Well, and I love the idea of total immersion in that sense. I mean, we have some total immersion schools around, but there is a difference when we're talking about let's listen to their music. Let's really talk to a variety of people versus just the teacher. Right. Don't you feel like that helps them? Those habits would help them learn that better?
Yes. And again, when I talk about music is a plus. When I see schools that say they will teach you a language just through music, no, I don't believe it. That's never happened. I don't think it will. It's a plus. It's really something to support classes and lessons and instruction and pure kind of old-fashioned lectures and lessons.
Yeah.
But it makes it nice. It makes it nice and meaningful,
Yeah. Well, and sometimes with music, it's like reading French poetry,
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not going to help you a lot on the street.
You'll see all the structures that you learn in context. That's what I like about it. But, it cannot be a concept in itself.
That's interesting. Well, great. Well, tell me maybe some of your long-term goals. I mean, you've had this school up and running, 6 years or so?
You can put it that way, yes. Mm-hmm.
And what do you have for the future?
For the future, well, it's been growing. It's going to continue growing, and I'd like to introduce more languages. I get calls for Italian, German, Russian, and I said, well, I don't have that yet. So, hopefully I'll be in touch with the best linguists who can help me put together the best methods to learn those languages based on what I've done for French, Spanish, and Mandarin. So yes, I'd like it to grow. I want not only homeschoolers to get into it, but adults as well. Because I think, as you said, there are many methods that come out of nowhere, but, I don't think they're very efficient. And I think what I've created is amazingly efficient. So it's a question of getting it out there.
Well, and I love how you have other people kind of in charge of different languages, because I think especially, we're going to talk about Rosetta Stone again, but they kind of just use the same pictures with different languages. I've done enough of that I've seen, that they just kind of just start adding in different words for the same pictures, where this is definitely a personalized approach to that language. Is that what you would?
Yes. I mean, it's just that Rosetta Stone, the way they did it was, again, to not spend years and years on creating the method. It could have been better had they put a lot more work into it. Meaning translating. I'm sorry, but to all those who say don't translate, yes, you need to translate. You don't translate for babies who learn a language naturally. For kids who are, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and adults, you need translation, otherwise they're lost. So for pictures, it might be fine for pictures, but when you start putting all whole sentences together, I'm sorry, you do need a translation. So it is more work. It's a lot more work, but it's worth it. It's just, the result is amazing. Among other things, what I do when I give translations, I put the various parts of the sentence in different colors, different fonts, so that it clearly stands out to the eye. That's the subject. Oh, it turns into an object in the sentence. And here's the verb. Oh, it's split in two parts. And here it goes, and the adverb goes here and there in French, here in English. Oh, that's interesting. And so that way they see the patterns visually.
Yeah. Well, and I recently heard somebody was talking about language that, we always have this idea that kids learn language so much faster, that their brains are ready and all of that stuff if they can learn it at a young age. This person that was talking about language said that once an adult has some, when they can use the language that they know to translate it into kind of another language, they actually learn it faster because they have a basis.
Right. And so the learning process is so different for a child and for an adult. For a child, they'll just pick it up naturally. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. I've seen it with my own kids, actually. They speak 3 languages. But for adults, it's different. You have to start with your foundations. Your foundations is your native language. So if it's English, you start from English. Otherwise, you have no base. And you're learning on nothing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and if you are an adult trying to learn languages, I guess it gave me a lot of hope to think that you can pick it up quickly just because you do have a basis, and
right.
That you should.
It takes desire, dedication, and time, and patience,
Exactly. We talked about that earlier. Great. So tell me a little bit about the legacy that you hope to leave. We talked about your mission and what this is about. Give us a glimpse into what you hope your legacy is going to be.
Well, I'm hoping that people will say, wow, that was the real thing, because it's like anything, you see different drinks that come out, and people like one or another. They see different coaches in baseball, basketball, and they're more or less good. And sometimes every once in a while in different fields, you have someone who's just amazing at what he does. And I'd like to be remembered for that. And that's not about me, really. I don't really care about myself. I want to create a method that will really allow people to speak a language fluently, to understand everything that people say without even leaving their home country. So you could be saying, wow, I think I'm pretty fluent now, because with the internet, it's a great tool. You can check your skills. You can go to a French website and see, do I understand? And you can go talk to anyone on the website and say, well, let's see if I can speak and communicate. And yes, so you think, wow, I can go to France, speak to anybody I want. I can go to France and live there if I want to. I feel ready without even living in France beforehand.
Well, and learning a language really does break down the barriers of misunderstanding, that maybe it gives us a glimpse into empathy into other people when we understand their language. So
that's so true.
Yeah. It definitely,
to an amazing extent, I think the best example I have is when I watch the news in Spanish, because I speak Spanish as well. When I watch the news in Spanish and French and in English, talking about the same issues, the same current events, and they don't get the same perspective. They don't make the same comments. They don't see it the same way. It's just crazy. It's so interesting, so fascinating, actually.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, before we say goodbye, do you have any final parting words of advice for our listeners? And then give us your contact information, how our listeners can get in touch with your language program.
Well, number one, our website is www.languagecityacademy.com, all attached together, and you will see my email on the contact page. I think that it's like anything. When you learn a language or when you learn how to play the piano or a sport, the beginning is so very frustrating, intimidating, and you want to give up right away. And I think once you pass that hurdle in anything that you do, an instrument, a sport, or a foreign language, or any arts, once you're brave enough to overcome the frustration of the beginning, and you put in a lot of hard work and dedication, it's not necessarily hard work. If you enjoy it, it's not work. Learning English or for Spanish has never been hard work for me. It's been a pleasure. Then there's nothing that can stop you from being fluent, really, if you get the right approach and the right method.
Great. Well, it's been so fun talking to you, Alex. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Luminous Mind. To learn more about Alex, go to our show notes, theluminousmind.net. Be sure to become a subscriber to our free email list and get our new monthly newsletter. Then check out our services tab to see how we can continue to assist you, our fire starters. Also, to help us continue production of inspiring content, go to the sponsor tab at theluminousmind.net for more information on sponsorship and affiliate programs. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Google+, Pinterest, and now Instagram. Get our free audio content by subscribing on YouTube, iTunes, and Stitcher. To help us grow, consider these easy ways. Tell your friends about us, leave us a review, share our content. Tell us how we can help you so together we can continue to light minds on fire and change the paradigm of education.